Today, I'm joined by Father Nate and Meaghan Crowley-Sullivan. I'll have them both introduce themselves in a second, but our topic today is leading AI professional development, what we can do as leaders in Catholic education to equip educators to navigate this AI world we now live in. With that, I want to just start off by asking the two of you. I know that in professional development that Father Nate and I have led, um, there's this sense of fear around AI technology, and I think it's important just to kind of address that elephant in the room from the get-go. What are some of the most common fears that you've encountered from educators regarding AI, and how have you seen effective leaders address these, including yourselves in that response?
Yeah. Well, I mean, rightfully so, there are a lot of feelings, right? There's excitement as well as fear because this technology is moving so quickly. There is so much potential, both good and bad, for this technology's use. I mean, in the work that we see a lot of teachers, of course, nervous about cheating and students losing critical thinking skills or the ability to do foundational things like writing or problem solving or summarizing, those types of things. There's those general fears. There's fears of this going to replace them as teachers or further devalue them in their profession. There are rightful fears about the environmental impact or the widening of equity gaps. So there's a lot wrapped up in this, not to mention there are a lot of teachers that are just nervous as to what this means for them if they don't feel tech savvy or they don't understand how this all works. So there's a lot of feelings involved in this type of training and support that we give teachers. And I think really, really effective leaders don't ignore these feelings. They very much, hold space for them, hear them, and they don't just regulate them either, right? They are responding to these feelings by either putting in place effective policy or getting ahead of that communication that goes out to parents or the stakeholders in your community, as well as providing good training, right? They're holding space for all these feelings and acknowledging that these are valid feelings and all of this. I mean, I have those feelings all the time still, and I do this work, right? I'm sure you guys as well. Huh? So I think that's what I would say right away. But
yeah, I think those are great points. And I totally hear you, Meaghan. I think that's the number one thing that we hear all the time is like, this is going to take my job, right? And I think there's some valid concerns, right? When you look at some of the tutoring type things and to say, okay, well, this is going to take over a lot of different industries. How is this going to look different for education? But I think the important thing for us to emphasize is like, look, especially in Catholic education, we got to emphasize the importance of teachers in the classroom and the ways in which they provide motivation, the ways in which they witness to our Catholic faith, which we think is absolutely critically important. And this is not something we can offload to an AI chatbot, right? Like that's just not going to happen. I think another challenge for PD is the way that teachers have seen so many innovations in education kind of come and go over the last 20 years and more. And they've made a lot of promises, right? In terms of like, oh, this is just going to change everything. This is going to be a game changer. Look out for smart boards, and I think those things have been really challenging for teachers because they've seen them come and go, and few of them have really delivered on the promises that they've made. So I think we really have to be attentive to that. We have to really listen to what their concerns are. And I think finally, one of the things that I think a lot of teachers are concerned about, and frankly, it's a challenge for all of us too, is the absolute breakneck pace at which this is developing. It is almost impossible to stay up with all these innovations in AI. And I mean, Lewis and I were joking about this last week. All of a sudden, like Google Classroom has generative AI like cooked into it, and we're like, what the heck? What was 2 days ago or something? All of a sudden, Google Maps has like generative AI, like you can talk to it. And I'm like, what is happening? And you just can't keep up with all of this, and so that's intimidating, right? Like I think that's a really a big challenge for folks to sort of shrink that the largeness of this development, and to do it in a way that's thoughtful and says, look, you don't have to know everything, but you've got to know something.
I find that when talking about AI, it's important to start with AI literacy, of just introducing what AI is to teachers and leaders when giving PD. I guess I just want to ask you, what do you believe are the absolute minimum essential AI literacy concepts that every educator should grasp to feel confident teaching in this AI era?
I would say probably at the very minimum, understanding like what it is and what it isn't. You don't need to fully understand how it's coded or things like that, but you do need to understand, how, it is a large language model where data is inputted and that data might be biased, right? So you need to understand how it's predictive, how it doesn't just analyze the website and pull off information verbatim, right? It's using predictive text to figure things out. So we want our teachers to grasp that basic concept. We also want them to understand, where it already is in society. This is not something new. It's already all around us. It's already impacting us. It's already impacting education. And then also understanding what potential impact it could have, right? Ethically, learning wise, our job wise. I think that those things are going to be important for that base knowledge for teachers, as well as to start thinking about, teachers are exhausted, right? Teachers are absolutely exhausted, but understanding at the bare minimum of how this could support them a little bit in managing some of their time, but also how it's going to impact student learning, so that if they need to adjust their assessments or adjust their assignments to support further learning, I think that those are going to be some basic things that teachers are going to need to understand.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. Especially, I think that assessment piece is so key, and I love that, Meaghan. I think really, I mean, we've got to make sure. I tell teachers all the time, like, you don't have to use this stuff, but you need to know what's out there. Like, you have to understand what is at your kids' fingertips all the time. I mean, can you imagine 50 years ago if there was a teacher who just didn't understand the idea of Cliff Notes or Spark Notes, like that those existed, right? Like, you need to know they exist. I'm sort of dating myself there, but teachers need to understand, like, this stuff is accessible in the world, and that our students are going to have access to it. I mean, Lewis and I often talk about the fact that some of this isn't totally new. So, for example, like a photo math, right, or the ability to like take a picture of a math problem and then to see it do all the show all the work, right? Like, that's not a new thing. That's been around for several years. But it's forced math teachers to adjust their instruction, right? Like, if you all of a sudden had all the answers in the back of the book, which is, we had every other answer when I was a kid, like, you've got to understand that that's no longer, showing your work is no longer a marker for understanding for your students. So that you've got to adjust and be creative in terms of the ways that you change your assessments. So I think showing the basics. I also think that, like, and we found this time and again in doing professional development for teachers, that a lot of people will say, yeah, I know what generative AI is. But then you show them and they're like, oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know it could do that, right? So I think, like, introducing them, and this is the literacy that you mentioned, right? Introducing them to some of the affordances and some of the limitations of generative AI is really important, just as a baseline. And I think you're right, Lewis, that like the literacy piece is the key. And then I think that's the point you made too, Meaghan, about like some of the hesitations and some of the ways in which we've got to be careful with this stuff. I really do think being cautious, especially about putting this in front of students, is really important.
Meaghan, I know you've shared with me in the past, and I'll share the screen in a moment. Could you explain Ideal's teacher AI journey staircase model? Because, I mean, we've already started referencing some of its concepts of, you got to start, we all start somewhere, and there are different forms of AI.
Yeah. So we put this together almost 2 years ago now, which is crazy. But this was, in response to the type of teachers we were coming across when we were working with them with AI. we very much found that a lot of people didn't realize that, generative AI was, widely accessible when ChatGPT came out. But people were already using forms of AI in adaptive software like iReady or STMath or Lexia. And they didn't realize they were already using adaptive software, which was AI, right? Or they didn't realize that when they were talking to someone online as a chat for help, that was AI. So we had a lot of unconscious users of AI that were using it every day in their everyday life or in the classroom without realizing it. So there were some people that were in that boat, right? We also had people that were starting to experiment with it. They had heard a little bit about how this could help them, whether that was to plan out meals for the week, or I know right away one of my coworkers put together like a workout plan for himself because he wanted to run the marathon, things like that. So they were using it for personal things. And then we also started seeing it from a job related standpoint, like, oh, I can use this to answer that parent email that I've been, agonizing over for the last hour. Things like that, where we had some early experimenters. And we started to see that this journey was growing, right? Teachers were starting to be more active users of it, have it as a personal assistant. Or some teachers were becoming really innovative and using it to level different texts because they didn't have access to leveled resources in their classroom. Here at Ideal, we support a lot of schools that have limited resources. So we were starting to see that this was a powerful way that our teachers were responding to the need of their students. And then we had some very advanced innovators who were starting to think about what it meant to form and support their students with this. So as you can see here, we have it like using it as your personal assistant, but also starting to think about teaching AI literacy to students. We typically don't encourage lower than 13, but this idea of like late middle school, early high school. So this has kind of been our initial entrance into like helping teachers reflect on where they are on their own journey and what they need in order to be successful. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that we want to push all of our teachers to the end of this ladder. It just is a way to actively reflect both as a leader, as an instructional coach, as an individual teacher on where am I and how can I support my own learning. And then as a result, when you're training teachers, it gives us insight into how we can differentiate our instruction. I know you guys are as well at HPL, we are big proponents of this idea that we should universally design for UDL, we should universally design our workshops to support each and every teacher, but we should also differentiate and provide things that each teacher needs. And they might need different things depending on where they are on this ladder, or they also might need different things depending on what they teach or what age they teach. So that's a little bit about this. I'm not sure how you guys have been using it, but I'd love to hear that as well.
Father Nate, do you want to jump in or do you want me to jump in?
Go for it.
What I really love about this model is that it starts at the everyday. Like it starts with, your voice assistant on your phone, starts with your Netflix algorithm that recommends the next show for you. We all unconsciously interact with some forms of AI constantly, right? And just I like how your model it starts there, and that's an entry point for many teachers. And then you kind of can move progressively up the model if you so desire. One thing that I'll share is, let me get to the right slide, give me a second, is I've kind of thought about this in a slightly different way about we're all aboard this AI train. The train, ChatGPT could not figure out to get the train to move the other direction. So I apologize for the confusion there. But similar to what Father Nate was saying earlier, I think there are the kind of like 3 stages that teachers can be at. Like this first stage is not using AI regularly, but you are aware of its impact. You are aware, like Cliff Notes before, you're aware that students can use AI and misuse AI. Yeah. Then the next station, this stage 2, is teachers may be using it for their own planning purposes or material preparation. And then finally, that's stage 3, where teachers are using AI with students. And I think it's important to call out that this isn't hierarchical in any way, right? You have your 3 stations. You can get off the train, you can stay on the train and go to the next one. It's up to whatever is most appropriate for your context. But I'd say that we are all aboard this AI train, and we all have to be at stage 1 at the very least.
Yeah, I love that. I think I love that your AI train is already off its rails. No, it's struggling on some of these things. No, that's great. I think that's really important. Yeah, it's tricky, right? Because when we're trying to demystify or even to help teachers to learn about that they're already using some of this stuff, it may be like, oh, okay, that's lowering my fear, or it may be like, oh God, I didn't mean to use that, right? So I think it's important to introduce them to some of the everyday uses. I think it's really interesting that even if you open up ChatGPT, one of the first things it does is it says like, here's how you can use this. You could do it this way or this way or this way. And one of the things I really like about your model, Meaghan, and is that it's introducing ideas and use cases to users to say like, these are some possibilities out there. This is so far beyond just Google, right? Like just searching, right? It's creation, it's synthesis, analysis, it's just all kinds of things. It really is so much, and I think we have to allow teachers to explore what's possible out there, and then give them some really interesting expert use cases where they can see, wow, this is how people who are really advanced in this space are using this to help them to do not just daily things, but really complex tasks.
And the nice thing too is that the ladder may not end there, right? We don't know where AI is going next. We don't know what that next rung might look like. So it leaves it open as well for that teacher who wants to be the innovator to take it to the next step, as well as to combat some resistance where teachers might be like, I'm so anti this, like you said, and they're like, oh wait, I am using it on Netflix, and I really do like that it knows what I want to watch, things like that. So it is something we use often in the work that we do, and I think it's really accessible for anyone who wants to use it to work with their teachers and their staff.
Meaghan, would you explain for us your teacher triage activity that we had discussed on our planning call? Because it seems very similar to what Father Nate was just describing.
Yeah, for sure. So it's funny, you said you love to start with those AI foundational things. And we do, because we think that's really important, but we actually step one place before that. And we call it the teacher triage training. And what it basically is we want teachers to see this as not another thing on their plates. Because there's always something else coming at them. We want them to see it as a way to support them in doing the basics better, right? Doing what they're already doing better. So we start with a very open-ended, more of a coaching style training where we acknowledge what are the pain points for our teachers. And the most common ones we come across are things like there's too much paperwork or too much to do in too little time, right? Parent communication is overwhelming. Or it could be something as simple as I serve a population where the language is different and I don't know how to help bring them into my classroom or communicate effectively. It could be things like the differentiation needs are too great in my class, or I lack the resources. That we have a bunch of different things. And rather than just be like, here's a cool tool that helps you write a lesson plan, right? Which, that's important too. But we look at, okay, so what is truly bothering you? If it takes you hours and hours and hours to do parent communication, how do we use AI to support that work while not losing that authentic human connection of you communicating with parents, right? So we look at it from that lens. That's what we start with. We start with that, and then we go, okay, now, what is this? How is it good? How is it bad? How can it be used? What should we be wary of? So then we go into AI literacy, but we want that entry point first where it fulfills a need. So that's our teacher triage, and that's how we typically start most of our trainings on AI.
That's great. I love that activity of sharing a demonstration and kind of walking educators through from there, right? Getting it in front of people and seeing what it looks like in the hands of an expert. One thing that you kind of touched upon that I wanted to address was the time-saving benefits of AI. There was a recent report shared by Gallup and the Walton Family Foundation that found that teachers who use AI weekly save close to 6 hours per week, which translates to 6 weeks a year with AI. And so starting off a PD session by saying if you use AI, you will save some time, that has some research grounding to it.
I think that's so tricky though, because at least, I don't know about you guys and the teachers I know teachers are still going to fill that time with the things that they always want to do anyways, right? Like they're upset that they have to spend so much time dealing with communication or putting together reports when they want to be with the students or making the instruction more meaningful. So I think we have to be really, really careful, especially in leaders in this space, to think that that time saved means that we can put more on our teachers' plates, because it's in the end probably not going to be time saved, at least definitely not in Catholic education, knowing what is expected of our teachers. So I think that that is powerful research, but to still be wary of what that means for us in adding more onto our teachers.
Yeah, I think that's right. I always think I don't do like fantasy football, and I always think like, gosh, that should give me so much more time in my day, because I see all the time that my friends spend on fantasy football, and I'm like, oh, thank God, I must have all this found time, and somehow that just never materializes. I mean, we all make choices, right, about what the time we spend, and I think some of that efficiency is possible. It really depends on your workflow, on your workload. I mean, I think generative AI is so much better suited to do certain tasks than others, right? And I think in as much as it's going to free us up to do less going through my lesson plans and aligning them to the standards and stuff like that, that can be really difficult, right, and time consuming and whatever. And the more I can actually spend time with my students, to get to know them as people, to assess what they know, and then to get, really to help them, where they're at. That's why any of us got into teaching, right? That's the important part, and the part that's the hope and dream of more efficiency, is that it's going to mean, like you said, Meaghan, more time doing the things that we really want to do.
I think in Catholic education especially, that's going to be so powerful, right? Because it's going to allow for us to do the Catholic things, the things that make us, we're one body in Christ, right? Allowed to be more time spent together. And I've always seen tech in education as a way to do that, to build human connection versus detract. So I think that that'll be really exciting, and I hope that our teachers do save themselves time in the end, because I do want them to have more work-life balance, and to spend more time with their families if they need, right? So I think it's really important that we don't backfill with more things.
I'm often reminded of the quote from Al Barnacle whenever he spoke at Blix a couple of years ago, that with AI, we get to expect more, right? But now we can call into question what that more is. Is that more personal connection with students? Is that more supports to help struggling learners? What is that more? And are we doing more just for the sake of more, or are we being intentional about what we're getting from it? I wanted to ask you about how you see educators best build confidence in using AI tools. Is it a matter just of, having the time and space to play around with it?
Sandbox time, definitely. There's actually quite a bit of research showing that teachers need that time and space to play with tech. But I think they need that time and space with other educators too. It's more powerful when you can bring educators together, even in your own school, or I know a lot of Catholic schools are single grade schools. So if you're able to pair up with another school and build that connection, it allows for kind of deeper discussion, deeper reflection. That connection is really, really powerful when you're playing in that sandbox. So I think sandbox time definitely, but with other people too.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think there's so many so many invitations to, like, wow, this is I could do this, or I could do this, or this, or this. And I think some of the things that are really critically important when we're introducing teachers to use generative AI is, as I mentioned before, giving them expert models, giving them people who have really done this before, and can show them, like, wow, this is something really interesting, and this is a novel, maybe productive way to use this. And then I also think, in as much as we can help them use it around their, in alignment with their values and the mission of the school, I think that's just going to be really important. Not just to say this is something to use because we have it, right? It's not a tool in search of a purpose, but really to say, let's start with our why, let's start with our purpose, and then see if this is the right thing to use.
Yeah, I think whenever a person who's coming in doing training, or whenever a school is doing the training themselves, if you can pair this with another thing that you're focusing on versus, like, now this is our AI initiative. No, your initiative is to build up math skills or raise your math scores, right? How can AI help that? This is not a competing initiative in your school. This needs to be, like you said, there needs to already be that purpose, and this is the tool serving that purpose, versus here's another thing that you may not get to.
Yeah, I like that idea of not seeing tech as just another initiative, but rather embedding it and kind of tagging it on to ongoing professional development. And maybe I'll start with this question. Since, maybe particularly at a high school level, so much content area expertise is needed in order to best use technology in classrooms. And administrators, while they are incredible and amazing and wear many, many hats, might not have that subject matter expertise to guide teachers in, which AI lesson plans are most appropriate and best. What would be your recommendation or your advice to leaders on how they can best define and share instructional goals for technology, and what's the most effective way for them to suggest AI tools for teachers to investigate?
It's a big question. I think, we want to lead as a learner, right? If you're a lead learner, you have to acknowledge and be vulnerable and say, I don't have it all together. I don't know everything. At the Ideal Institute, we were one of the first people to be like, we don't know every single thing when we come in, right? Like, that's not our role. Our role is to facilitate and support you in this work. We have expertise in certain areas, and we value and celebrate the expertise that you bring to the table. So I think any leader at a school needs to remember and acknowledge that, right? That they don't know everything with AI, and as fast as it's moving, there's no way you could, right? And I think also lean upon the bright spots in your community. You're going to have teachers in your community that are already exploring it, being innovative with it, that are trying things out. So lean on them, have them lead different sessions, but then also make sure that there's time and space for exploring. We've been working with some high school teachers that are super overwhelmed about, none of the assignments I had are going to work anymore in the AI age, right? So if that's a big fear, if that's a big, sense of nerves for your teachers, give them time and space to work together and figure that out together. Build in time back to school or during your PD days for there to be just time and space to figure it out. So I think that's a start. Policy, I think that's part of your question too. I think that over micromanaging your teacher policy can backfire on you a little, with everything changing so quickly. I think Alan said it in your last session as well. Like, your list of do nots is going to just keep on growing. So, trusting your teachers and trusting in their curricular expertise, and giving them that space to be innovative is going to be important. But I'd be curious as to what you think, Father Nate. Policy is not my.
Yeah.
I'm not an expert in policy.
No, I think it's spot on. I think there's this is a moment where I think the church's idea of subsidiarity is really important. So, like, allow people on the ground level to be empowered, as you said, and to make decisions. there's no school leader out there that I know that is an expert in every single content area that's being taught in their school. It's just not possible. I find that on our team. Thank God Lewis is good at math. But this is not a principal's role, right? In many ways, their role is to support, to be the lead learner, as Meaghan mentioned. And I think the way that it's really important, especially in terms of policy, is for them to establish, first of all, trust in their teachers, to establish structures that make sense there. So whether that's a department chair or a PLC or whatever it is, so that teachers can talk to one another, share ideas, and especially get some of those people who are bright spots and championing really cool ideas to share that among their peers, and not just say, this is a top-down initiative, you will do this, right? That just doesn't usually work well. But they got to know it, right? And they have to understand what's out there and how this can be used. I think it's also really important in terms of policy development to create a policy that's flexible and capacious enough so that you can allow teachers within their own classroom some freedom and some autonomy there to say, I mean, there very well might be teachers that say, look, this is a zero tech, zero AI classroom. Some great teachers I know say that right off the bat. There's a lot of good reasons why teachers might say that. And I think we've got to understand if that's an intentional choice, if they're doing that because they think that is the best way to achieve the learning goals of the classroom, that's great. If it's because they're like, I don't want any of this stuff and I'm going Amish on it, like that's not a good reason, right? That's not helpful. So they've really got to be, I think leaders need to be thoughtful in the ways that they empower their teachers and the ways that they set policy. And I think another really important thing, and this is a role that leaders can play, is to really do their own research, especially on church teaching around AI, what's been said, the document Antiqua et Nova, really looking at that and reading up on other AI books that are out there to say, this is how some people have used this. And this just may or may not fit within our mission. So just, making sure that they understand what's possible, where the mission is, and how these things align before they're making claims of like, I don't know, I guess this, Gemini thing's out there. We better figure it out. Let's all do this on our PD. So I think that's the role that leaders can really play.